I hate paying taxes to the government. They're the worst fiduciary in the planet that could take those dollars and they just piss them away.
He said, "You're crazy, one, for going to law school. Why would you want to be an attorney?" I just feel really confident that when you have those strategic relationships, you have the right partners. I mean, you literally can do anything. It's such a huge force multiplier to have somebody like that on your team. But once you do that, you realize that, man, you can really pay attention and not exploit, because they're put there in the code for a purpose. After 24 years in the military, paying 32 cents on the dollar for every dollar I made, I realized here's an opportunity where I can really reduce my tax liability. And we did that pretty successfully for the last 4 years. I'm actually a retired Army officer. I went to law school in 2013. I am one of the founding partners of a firm, a legal firm. We're in Castle Rock, Colorado. I think it'd be characterized as a boutique firm. I love working with young entrepreneurs. I love people that are getting into their first or second or third private equity raise as a means to scale, because I kind of suffered through that, right?
Do you think opportunity zones are going to have a resurgence in 2025? Welcome to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, where we explore how to buy, sell, and optimize your business. I'm your host, Chris Seegers, and I'm so excited to introduce my incredible guest, Byron Elliott. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity, buddy. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man. So excited. So Byron founded Three Pillars Law with his wife. He owns businesses. He owns real estate. He helps people fundraise around both those. And I appreciate... So I'm from Westcliff, Colorado. Byron owns businesses and real estate down there. And I ran across him through his mom, which was interesting. We went to an angel investing conference and his mom was like, you're really weird. And you're doing a lot of stuff. You should meet my son. And I was like, okay, cool. So anyways, excited to hear your story, Byron. You've got a lot to share. You've got a ton of legal and just strategy wisdom to share with the audience. So we always start with the story. And really just want you to tell your story to the audience, back them up to how you got into the space, and then how you got to where you are today. And then we'll just dig into some questions that might be helpful to them.
That's great. I love it. So as you mentioned, I am one of the founding partners of a firm, a legal firm. We're in Castle Rock, Colorado. I think it'd be characterized as a boutique firm. We've got 3 to 4 full-time staff and then 6 of counsel attorneys, just great attorneys. And 90% of our business is in the private equity space. So we help primarily real estate entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs generally who are looking to raise capital to fund a business from private investors without having to register that business with the SEC as if you're like a stock, bond, or mutual fund. But just to circle back to the story side of the house, this is actually the legal thing is my second career. Real estate development's kind of a third career, and we have a handful of other careers, I guess, beyond that we're starting to get into. I'm a retired Army officer. I was in the Army for 24 years. I retired in 2019. I went to law school in 2013. Most common question I get is, were you a JAG? No, I wasn't a JAG. By the time I had gone to law school in the Army, I think I was considered untrainable by the JAG Corps. So a little long in the tooth, a little opinionated. So I started off the night program at University of Denver along with my wife. So we've been on this journey together. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a bit. We hung a shingle. That was our goal, to hang a shingle right out of law school. A lot of people say don't do that, but we had really good mentors. I'll call him out by name. Don Rexine. So Rex Rexine is his nickname. He was a really key person in Katie and I in our lives as we moved into our second profession. He was a general practice attorney for about 40 years. So on the legal side of the house, we had that lifeline that we were looking for. And then I went to undergraduate school for business. I went to grad school and got an MBA. And then my wife is just super savvy, administratively sound, very systems oriented. So we thought on the business side of the house, we could do that. And then we had this, repository of legal knowledge that we could always draw upon. So we did it. We hung a shingle, and we were pretty successful, I think, in terms of we were in the black really in the second month of business. We made some key decisions. Yeah, it was great. And we've slowly built out over time our firm. And again, we focus primarily on helping entrepreneurs and, for the most part, real estate entrepreneurs figure out how to pull together capital stacks so you can fund your deals.
So let's back up to the mentor piece of it, because I've had amazing mentors my whole life, which I think has led to the small amount of success we've had. What were some of the things that your mentor told you as you were thinking about doing something that doing a startup is high failure rate, especially in the legal side of things? What were some of the things that he told you that said, hey, this is going to work and we can make this happen?
Yeah, it was great. He actually discouraged us. He, along with everybody else, he said, "You're crazy, one, for going to law school. Why would you want to be an attorney? And then two, nobody hangs a shingle." But you know what? He had done that. That's exactly what he had done. And it was an interesting, there's a lot of similarities there. He and his wife actually started a firm together with another friend of theirs. But at the end of the day, and you know this a little bit about us, and we'll get to know each other a little bit more in the years to come, but when my wife and I set out to do something, we just do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those things where there was a business partner that I could trust. I knew that she was going to deliver on more than what she said that she would do, and she had to, in fact. Interesting fact, I got recalled to active duty with the Army. So for about 5 years, I moonlit as an attorney, and she was carrying the water for the firm as a general practice and family law attorney. And she's an amazing individual. And that's where I felt I was comfortable if I was going to go into business with anybody, especially in something that, you know, could be considered pretty risky. You definitely want to have those business partners lined up, right? She's just amazing.
Yep, 100%. I'm writing a book on buying businesses called Buying Main Street. And that's actually a piece of one of the chapters is sourcing partners. And there's an interesting exercise on just going through all the partnerships that have failed, and it could be business or relational, and then all the ones that have succeeded, and basically taking the metrics from those and plugging them into kind of your partnership one sheet that tells you what would make a good partnership. And that's one of the reasons I've gone into partnership with my siblings as well. Like, they're incredible thinkers, they're hard workers, and they're going to show up in everything we do. I'm like, it's going to work. We're problem solvers. Like, it might take us longer than we think, but we're going to make it happen. So I love that, man.
Yeah, that's great. And I just feel really confident that when you have those strategic relationships, you have the right partners. I mean, you literally can do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a huge force multiplier to have somebody like that in your team. So yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be a fun read.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So fast forward us. So you get back into, how'd you get into real estate? Because that is, you have had a lot of careers, and that's a big, that's a big jump. Most attorneys that I've found, and don't take this offense, but most attorneys and real estate agents do all these real estate transactions and never own any real estate. And I'm like, guys, you know more than the guys buying the real estate, and you're not buying the stuff that's going to make you the money. So how'd you
Yeah.
make that jump into real estate?
Yeah, it's funny, even as a kid, my favorite game was Monopoly, right? It was such a thing. I didn't grow up with any hard skills like being able to build things, but the idea that you can take land or you can take a property and you can put it to its best, highest use was always very intriguing to me. A challenge that I had, and this kind of leads into why I do what I do now, a challenge that I had while I was in the military as a younger man is not being able to invest in certain things. I bought my first house when I was 20. It was just a little townhome in Colorado Springs. I think I bought it for like $36,000. And
now it's worth $1 million.
Yeah, well, that's what's so funny, right? So I was 20 when I bought it, and we sold it when I was 27. And all I had done was I had a tenant in there, because as soon as I moved to my next duty assignment in Germany, I had to find a tenant. I rented it out for 5 years, and we sold it for like 76 grand.
Nice.
Right? Without having to put really any money into it. I had that residual income coming in every month, and then the tax benefits. So that was a great first experience. But then over my career, I just moved from place to place. And it wasn't until about 12 years later that I was able to purchase another couple real estate assets. And by that time, I had done some self-education, probably the standard stuff that a lot of people in my space look at. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows that. I piggybacked off Robert Kiyosaki and all of his advisors in the subsequent books or audio tapes or audio books, and started to learn really about dig into the tax benefits. Mm-hmm. And that got me really, really excited. So there was a period there when I was in my early 30s where I purchased a primary residence, and I lived there for 2 years. and then I'd buy something else, and then I would
Yep.
piggyback. So every 2 years I would sell something with, and under this personal residence exemption, it's a non-taxable event. So you can build up this kind of war chest of money to go out and really get after investing. And I compared that with my limited experience in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds and realized that the tax benefits aren't there. They're not even close, right?
Yep, for sure.
Not even close. And you're typically paying fees whether you make money or you lose money. So, and you don't control your own destiny, right? And whereas if I have a property, whether it's one of the crappy properties like Baltic Avenue on the Monopoly board, or it's one of the yellow properties or the green properties, at the end of the day, you're kind of running your own show. And
it gives you leverage. I mean, that's one thing that I've told folks. So we love real estate and we love buying businesses and helping people buy businesses. I love the amount of leverage you have with that. And like anybody that's just W-2 earners, you've got to get into something that gives you some tax benefit. And I'll admit to a mistake we made this year. We needed to buy another building and do a cost segregation study on it to basically, minimize our tax burden. And I kind of forgot about it. We were buying another business. We were doing this other stuff. We get to the end of the year and I'm like, oh my gosh, our tax burden is massive this year. And it was my own fault. But had we bought that building, there's so many levers that we can do. And even owning a business, like you can buy equipment, you can buy a vehicle, you can, there's so many things you can do. So that's really interesting that that's what got you into it. Because that was one of the things that got me into it too. I hate paying taxes to the government. They're the worst fiduciary in the planet that could take those dollars and, they just piss them away. So anyways, continue on. But I love that. That's a great way to start.
Yeah, I agree. And then, once you start paying attention to the tax benefits, and again, this is a little nugget that comes out of the Kiyosaki stuff, but once you start paying attention to the code, right, the Internal Revenue Code, and start looking at, okay, what is the government incentivizing you to do? Well, it incentivizes you to buy real estate as a personal residence for sure. So there's that exemption. You have this opportunity to cost seg study and accelerated or bonus depreciation. So if you plan it right, and I'm in the same boat as you, man, I blinked and now we're into December of 2024. So I've got to do a little strategizing myself in this last 20 days or so. But once you do that, you realize that, man, you can really pay attention and not exploit, because they're put there in the code for a purpose. And so after 24 years in the military, paying, 32 cents on the dollar for every dollar I made, I realized here's an opportunity where I can really reduce my tax liability. And we did that pretty successfully for the last 4 years. Really excited about that. And it's real estate. I mean, there's other businesses, of course, depending on what type of business you're in and what you take advantage of. But for me, real estate is just it's the neatest and cleanest way to do it. It affords the most tax incentives, and I just love it. Right? It's a lot of fun. So
yeah, and that's why we always encourage, if you have the desire and acumen, get a business and the real estate, because the business, you can grow that cash flow to the moon, especially service-based businesses. There's so many levers to grow that cash flow. And then your real estate, if you buy it strategically, gives you so many tax benefits. So you might make $1 million a year and your tax burden goes dramatically down because you've got these appreciating assets that give you all of the tax benefits. And there's just so many fun things, man. We've done 1031 exchanges probably 25 times. We bought some mineral and royalties in Texas, sold them, bought a piece of land in Tennessee, sold that, bought a piece of land somewhere else, sold that and bought that motel in Westcliff. And, basically kept capital stacking like you guys did, to where all of a sudden it's we've got this great asset that we started probably 50 grand, right? We started with maybe a $50,000 piece of minerals and royalties. So I love this stuff. And the education piece of it, I always encourage young people, man, go learn about business and real estate and you're going to be great. So that's awesome. So let's talk some of your projects, man. So last 4 years, tell us, you've done a bunch of crazy stuff, bunch of different stuff, and I think very creative. So walk us through some of those projects.
So how then I was able to kind of pivot from retiring from the military. Here we're running this law firm, which pays the bills and keeps the lights on. We started doing primarily this work in this private equity space. And so the one thing that bothered me when I was younger is you can only invest so much unless you know about the way to do so with other people's money. You can only invest so much based on your personal balance sheet, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a W-2 guy for the Army for 24 years. And granted, the Army was amazing to me, gave me a ton of education benefits. At the end of the day, the W-2 income wasn't going to let me invest in multifamily, right? At
Mm-hmm.
least as not a general partner or a primary on a deal. And it just so happened as I was transitioning out of my time in the Army and getting back into the legal space, I came across a peer of mine in the military who had built this self-storage business or was on the verge of building this amazing self-storage business, but he's doing it primarily through these private equity raises. And so as I got to know him over time, and he wouldn't mind me saying his name's Scott Lewis. He's with Spartan Investment Group, the big self-storage player in Golden. I met him through the Army Reserves, right?
Nice.
And so just getting to know each other, he said, hey, look, man, if you can help us figure out how to raise this private equity legally and ethically and do it at a reasonable price point, we'll give you all our business and then we'll promote you to other people. And I was like, this sounds amazing, right? It's this nexus between the real estate and law, and I don't have to practice family law. I'm not doing civil litigation. It's like, this is exactly where I want to be. And so it was beautiful because I could cut my teeth in this space on the legal side of the house and understand these beautiful Securities Act exemptions that lets us raise private equity, again, without having to register as a stock bond or mutual fund. And so I did that for a few years, and true to his word, he gave me a ton of business, and true to my word, I do it at a reasonable price point. And we've had enough business now to build our entire firm around that particular practice area. So then after 2-3 years, I'm talking to my wife, Katie, who also likes to invest in real estate. And I'm like, well, these other people are doing this. I don't see any reason why we can't do this and kind of scale and grow what we're doing as opposed to single family home here, single family home there. So we've done a number of offerings now. So we're, I think, 10, 12 offerings in on our own. So I spend about half my time, or according to the IRS, 49% of my time doing legal work and 51% doing real estate development activities, right? So, and we found this little honey hole that we like in Southern Colorado. You mentioned West Cliff. So everything that we own right now, aside from a property out in Lake McConaughey, which is really supposed to be kind of like our own personal like vacation space, everything we have is within an hour of West Cliff, Canyon City, Florence. So these little tertiary markets in Southern Colorado that we think are right in the path of progress. They're due for development, especially, coming out of COVID and this working from home notion, and you want to be close to outdoor activities and everything that goes along with that. We're really bullish on that part of the state of Colorado and that part of the region. And so we've invested in 2 mobile home parks. We've got 4 historic properties, which I could talk about. We've got a property up in West Cliff. And then just last year, we purchased a 1,250 acre development right down in Canyon City that we're really excited about. It's got an award-winning golf course, and 2 residential neighborhood developments, and another opportunity for 2,400 residential units, some combination of multifamily and single family. So we're just really excited about that. And just a great example of being able to parlay the legal experience into our passion for real estate. And we're kind of off and running.
I love it, man. I love it. Okay, so why rural areas as opposed to more urban? Because almost every person would advise folks that are investing, hey, go find a highly populated area that you think you can find a decent deal at. Was that strategic, or you just were like, hey, we see the upside? And we're the same way. I mean, we love Southern Colorado. That's where we're investing in all forms and facets. We think there's a ton of upside, but we're contrarians, and I think you are too in that.
Yeah, it does take a little logical leap of faith for sure, right? Part of that is it's a lower barrier to entry. And so like I have clients who, they're in the knife fight in Denver and Dallas and Tampa and all the places. And so all the major MSAs where they're the hot markets, people are in a knife fight there to get a deal and whatever else. And they're successful, they do well. But I have clients who, let's say they buy an apartment complex in Dallas, and their business plan is to raise rents $100 to $150 a month across the board, across all the units. That's great. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have a 500 unit apartment complex, you're going to make some money for sure. For us, a lot easier to pick up an off market deal, maybe some seller finance deal, get it at a good purchase price. And then in the units, we can raise rents 200 to 400 because we're taking something that's dilapidated or distressed and definitely needs a value add component to it. And we can raise rents maybe twice as much than some of the people competing in those MSAs. Now, there's some challenges that go along with that for sure. you and I have talked in the past about, municipalities and the municipality staff and personalities and, the various municipal codes, and are they up to date? Do they make sense? I mean, you're dealing with a whole host of issues, but I would wager that the people that are dealing in the MSAs, the metros, are dealing with a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah, 100%. So let me ask you this. Of the real estate or business life cycle, which pieces do you love best? Because my wife and I were talking about, we're looking at selling one of our properties, and really we've realized we love the first phase where you take this really nasty thing and beautify it and take, unlock 95% of the value and stabilize it. We love that piece, but we don't love as much the piece that once we're like, hey, this thing has less creative juices that we can kind of put into it and it's stabilized and somebody else can step into it. That's a piece where we kind of get a little bored and we're like, okay, let's go find the next gnarly problem to solve. What pieces do you and your wife like of that? Or is it the whole thing?
I would say it's really a project by project basis. I think you and I are similar in that we're at this stage in life where we can pick and choose our projects. So we
For
definitely
sure.
want to underwrite them so that they pencil. But at the same time, we're just in a place where do you want to spend your time doing that? So like I'm in a place where I want to get into projects that, one, I can make good relationships. Two, there is some optimization that goes along with it. It's underperforming for some reason. Either it's poor management or just a lack of marketing, or it's, mom and pop, and they're ready to cash out. They just haven't put a lot of effort into either the property or the business or whatever it may be. Or we do get a sense of excitement. Like I said, I've got a business background, and I like to see that implementing business systems. And I like, my wife and I enjoy it. She's really good at optimizing things. So that stuff is fun for sure. So I'm giving you like a typical legal answer. Like, it depends, right? But on a project by project basis, high level, I want to have fun doing it, but I'm in a different
Yeah.
place. If I'm a younger guy and I've just got to figure out how to find a couple deals and get some deals under my belt, when I was younger in my 20s and 30s, I'll take anything. And that was
Yeah.
fun,
Yeah, no doubt, man. I mean, like we started with in 2012, we bought our first property and then just kept going. And I will say, as we had kids and we got a little older, we were a lot choosier. When we were young, it was like, hey, we'll work 7, especially if you're working with your spouse or someone you really enjoy working with. We would work every weekend and love it. Like, it was fun. Like,
Yeah.
it'd be like, okay, cool. We're underwriting this real estate deal or this business or buying these minerals or whatever. But as we got older, we're like, okay, we need to kind of prioritize our family and the kids and focused a little bit differently. Let me go a little bit different direction. So we've just had like an incredible political change in our country, I think. And it'll be very interesting to see from a marketplace standpoint where 2025 goes. But if you think about like a 20-year-old or 25-year-old young Byron coming into 2025, what would you counsel them with? What are some wisdom you'd like to impart to them? Because I've had a lot of young folks saying, hey, how do we interpret this? Are we in a boom or are we in a bust? Should we buy? Should we sell? And so I'm always interested to hear people's counsel on that.
Yeah, I think there's really three things, two that are related to, this change in the political climate. And one that I think is just kind of an enduring concept. So the first one is you got to understand how money works. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a highfalutin statement, right? But you got to understand the different types of lenders, right? Definitely do some homework on, you have the standard commercial lenders, your local credit unions, local banks and whatever. They offer a very different loan product than, let's say, CMBS lenders, right? Or private equity lenders, or
Mm-hmm.
using private equity money. You got to figure out the capital stack at the end of the day, to me, is the hardest thing. You can find deals, but you've got to find capital to fund those deals. And there's 100 different ways to do it. So you learn about that, learn about creative financing, right? Learn about different institutional lenders, learn about FHA and USDA. I mean, I'm talking specifically real estate here, but if you want to go
Mm-hmm.
small business loans, Patriot Express loans, like you've got to figure out what are all the various pots of money out there that can actually fund your deal. Because if you don't do that, then you're left with like friends and family around, right? I mean, that's what it is.
Yep.
The second piece is understand that concept that I discussed a little bit earlier is the tax code and how the government is incentivizing people to behave. And by people, I mean entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
So we rattled off a host of real estate tax incentives like cost seg and, personal residence exemption and 1031s, like all of those things are huge. Understand those. I think you've got to get into those and understand those concepts at least to cobble deals together. But there are other programs out there depending on the different industries. Oil and gas is a big one. I just came across here something fascinating, right? And this is a client schooled me up on this. We're helping them raise private equity to do something in the entertainment industry, and turned me on to a section of the Internal Revenue Code whereby if you invest in arts and entertainment to some degree, and the investment is characterized the right way, you can get a $1-for-$1 tax credit. So you put in $100,000, like this year at the end of the year, put $100,000 in to help fund this filming or production effort or whatever it may be. You get a $1 for $1 reduction in your tax liability while you still have upside on the tail end of the investment down the road. Those are the things. Oh yeah, it's amazing. Research and development tax credits. The projects that we did in Southern Colorado, there's 4 of them where we used a historic tax credit program, which a lot of people don't know about. But if you find the right property that's on the National Historic Registry and you develop the scope of work so that it comports with the National Park or National Preservation Standard, NPS standards, you can get a 20% federal tax credit, $1-for-$1 reduction in your tax liability, and a 25% state tax credit, all based on qualified rehabilitation expenses on a historical property. At the end of the day, that's a way for the government to incentivize developers like myself and like you to take something that's underperforming. Maybe it's vacant housing. Maybe it's a renovation opportunity where you can put something back in the inventory that produces something to the tax base, to the municipality, to the county, to the state. And at the same time, here you have a project that maybe wouldn't pencil otherwise, but it pencils now because you understand these tax incentives. It's a huge thing.
Do you like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking the subscribe button now and check out our website, www.excoadvisors.com. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
Do you think opportunity zones are going to have a resurgence in 2025?
That's a great question. I'm wrestling with the same. I have that huge development property I have. The entire thing is an opportunity zone.
Nice.
And there's still some benefit there. My personal opinion, yeah, I think they'll relook that. It's a world of difference, between having people in office. Here in Colorado is a great example. I don't think the people in office here are real estate developers, and they didn't earn their money through real estate development. Certainly not on the governor's side of the house, right? He's a tech guy. And so when you read the tea leaves in Colorado, it's so tenant friendly, right? That development is hard in the state of Colorado, right now. At the national level, look at the tax cuts and the Jobs Act 2017 and all the benefits that went to real estate developers and all the development that happened based on the tax incentives in that bill. So it's amazing, right? So I'm really crossing my fingers, and I'm sure you are too, that something comes out of this new election cycle that is really business friendly and certainly real estate friendly. God, I hope so.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Colorado has done a really good job of being anti-employer, anti-real estate, anti-everything that's creating the tax base, which is unfortunate. But I mean, all those cycles change when you get enough pain. So I'm definitely optimistic, but regardless, going into next year, one of the things Warren Buffett has said this like probably 50 times over the past 3 years, but he's like, if you're a young person, invest into educating yourself. And you just mentioned that, right? Like you've got to get smarter and you've got to get moving. One of the pieces of advice I gave to a young man was you got to get off the sidelines. We have so many people that are sitting, waiting to see what's going to happen, what the political cycle did, what COVID was going to do. I'm like, you can't afford to wait any longer. You got to put it in play, whatever that is. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you got to get it, put it into play. Let me ask you this. What's one of your favorite stories? And then I want to close with resources, books and resources, but what's one of your favorite stories from all the projects that you guys did over the past 5 to 6 years? Is there any, because we've had some crazy ones, and I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah, I don't know how entertaining this is going to be, but it may drive my third point home that I was going to make, and it's about.
Oh, sorry.
You're good. It's perfect segue. It's about your partners and your partnerships and the people that you do business with. And so I've told you a little bit about kind of my journey, but about 2 years ago, I found this land development opportunity, and I put it under contract. To your point, is like it's a contact sport, right? You got to get in. You learn more even if it isn't a super successful investment, you learn more by doing it one time, two times than going through an MBA program. And that's been my experience.
100%.
I learned so much, right? Well, I had this, what I thought was kind of a tiger by the tail, where I'm buying, 1,250 acres at $3,100 an acre in Colorado along the Front Range, nestled up right next to the mountains. So I put this thing under contract, but my strong suit isn't raising the capital. It's crafting the deals and, navigating the zoning resolution and the city planners and everything goes along with it. But because I had invested time and energy in multiple mastermind groups and real estate conferences and weekly accountability meetings and whatever else, I had developed this network, and I was able to, after a lot of hemming and hawing and deciding whether to pursue this thing or not, I was able to pull together 7 other people from my network that each had a very specific skill set, but was also very adept at helping to raise capital. And so I pulled together an 8-person team, which, may be a large team, right, for one of these little private equity raises. But I've got a guy or 2 guys that are really good at investor relations, right? They've got the full machine built up. They've got the newsletter built out, the investor platform, everything that goes along with it. And they had a robust investor network. It was great. I had 2 other team members had successfully gone full cycle on multiple multifamily deals, lots of experience in the real estate space. Another 2 members that own a mortgage company, right, and actually grew up in the area. So I have all these kind of, force multipliers on this team. And we were able to raise the cash and enough working capital. It's about $6 million, which for a lot of people, that's a drop in the bucket. That's nothing. But from a retail investor network, we raised $6 million in about 3 weeks to purchase the property cash. We've got some reserves to work with. We're going through all of the development process, that goes along with it. But the reason I highlight that particular story is because, again, it's a contact sport. If you're not putting yourself in the same place with people who you potentially can either, do business with, partner with, or whatever it may be, or raise money from, right? I don't think that's time well spent. I think you got to get out there and, to your point, get in the game in some way. But the other piece I just want to emphasize with that is each one of those people brings a very unique skill set to the team, and they do things that maybe I'm not great at doing or I don't have the bandwidth to do. But as a result, I think we're going to have a really successful investment. And so you got to get out there and meet like-minded people that get after it and have the grit and the work ethic and the special skills.
Yeah, I love that. Dan Sullivan, we were in a coaching program called the Strategic Coach. He wrote a book called Who Not How. And the book literally could be summed up in that word. You don't even need to read the book. But anytime you're thinking about how do I solve this, it's what are the people that if I put them in the room would love to solve this problem and be good at it. And that was a game changer for Tara and I. I mean, anytime we do a big project now, it's like, all right, here's our skill sets, but who else would make this fun and easy and has the same or similar core values and culture? I love that. Okay, so let's close with what are top books, could be any kind of book, personal development, business, investing, real estate, top books or top podcasts, or what are the resources that you're going to this year or ones that you've discovered that you're really on fire for, you really love?
Yeah, so I mentioned the Kiyosaki stuff. That's always good. A lot of people just go to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and they don't realize he did a series of books that
they're all fantastic.
Yeah.
And some of them are actually free on Audible.
Yep.
Like the Audible subscription, I think there's 2 or 3 that I read that were free through that. So,
yeah. So like his advisor series, Tom Wheelwright on the tax side of the house, the real estate loopholes, like those are some great books in terms of just understanding concepts, like high level, right? I think those are great. When I first started out in this space, I listened to a lot of Joe Fairless stuff. And so he's the longest daily real estate podcast. And he's been doing it for forever. He's with Ashcroft Capital. And it was really great. The first, a whole bunch of the first years or a couple years worth of podcasts, they would have interviews like this with people who were operating in the space. But then he would also have a syndication school series. And he had his guy, Theo, would take apart one of these private equity raises and just talk about it. Like, what do you need to do? How do you underwrite a deal? There's free tools and practical exercises. It was an amazing thing. And I was able to take some of my windshield time and just start to piece together some of these concepts and use some of the tools. That's a great foundation. And then, on the LP side of the house, there's a book called The Hands-Off Investor, I believe. And that's great because it's written from an operator or sponsor, and it talks though to the LPs, the limited partners, so the people that are passively investing in a deal. And here are all the things that you should be getting from your sponsor. And it's very, very comprehensive, right? Super, super good read. I'm in a space now where the stuff that we do has to be fun, like we talked about, but I also want it to be scalable. And that's the thing is you cut your teeth younger on smaller deals and smaller businesses and startups and that kind of stuff. But at some point you realize there's a finite amount of time that you can spend on a project in each day. And a lot of times the same amount of time and energy that you're spending on a smaller deal, you can be spending on a larger scalable project, and the returns are exponentially better. And so for fun, like I'm reading about these, reading or listening about these visionary people like Elon Musk. I mean,
yeah, his book's wild.
Oh God, it's just amazing and quirky, but it just talks about visionaries and like thinking beyond what your capability is. Sam Zell's got a book out. It's just amazing. And it just talks about his journey from being first year law student and just thinking big and crafting bigger deals. So once you get kind of the nuts and bolts or the blocking and tackling or whatever analogy you want to use, once you get that in place and start to understand those concepts, you got to get in a room with the people or start listening or reading about the people who pull that stuff off and what tools that they use and how they craft deals. So that's kind of what's on my reading list right now is those kind of books.
I love it, man. So if people want to get a hold of you, where should they go? And what I'll premise is we have used a lot of attorneys, very expensive attorneys out of Texas to structure. We've done, 6 private equity funds in oil and gas. Byron is better than all the attorneys we've used, I can tell you, and he's way more affordable. He knows the stuff. Like when you walked me through it, I was like, golly, I think we paid this guy, $250,000 over a 18-month period to do the same thing that you're doing. And you're explaining it to me a lot more clearly. So anyways, Byron, where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I love that. Email's great. Byron@3pillarslaw.com. Reach out anytime you like. I love working with young entrepreneurs. I didn't share this. I spent about 2 years working with a veteran entrepreneur nonprofit called Bunker Labs. They're a bunch of startup stuff, less real estate related, but I like to spend my time either volunteering or spending time on educational platforms like this. But my ideal client, to be honest with you, I love people that are getting into their first or second or third private equity raise as a means to scale, because I kind of suffered through that, right? It really bothered me when I couldn't continue to acquire properties because of my personal balance sheet. And so once I cracked that nut, I just take a lot of pride in helping people in their journey. So you want to reach out to me, you have some questions about how that worked or kind of the do's and don'ts and the ins and outs, we're happy to do that. And then to your point, Chris, we try to make our price point real reasonable for people that are using private equity for the first, second, or third or fourth time or whatever, simply because it makes sense, right? If you guys are successful and I don't gouge you on legal fees on the front end and we can get you through an offering or two or acquisitions or 2 or 3 or whatever, you're going to grow, we're going to grow. That same self-storage company that I talked about, they've been on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing in the last 4 years. So it's just a good news story all around. And it lets me do the mentoring and coaching that I really liked and enjoyed when I was in the military. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I agree. And I think another bit of counsel for young folks is do that service, like even if it costs you a little bit to get into those ecosystems, because I guarantee you, because you're reasonable and you're helping people, you've got way more investment opportunities. You're seeing a lot more deals that may be good deals for you guys. I mean, we've done the same thing on every one of our capital raises in oil and gas. We've been very, very fair with our waterfalls because we're like, look, guys, we want a 20-year relationship, not a 3-year relationship. And so if you're an LP that wants to invest with us in oil and gas or real estate or whatever it ends up being for 20 years, great. You're a fit, and we're not going to gouge you because we're all going to make a lot of money over a long period of time. So definitely as a young man, I was not in that headspace, right? We've become a lot more relational as we've hopefully gotten a little more wise and less transactional, because the money's going to follow if you're taking care of people and serving them well. So awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to have to do another one because I was just thinking at the end of this about the fundraise I want to do using you guys. We want to do an impact fund, but that's a whole nother conversation around where that's coming out and some of the scorecards around that. But we'll have to have you back. But Byron, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you, brother.
You got it. Whenever you like. It's a lot of fun, Chris. Good to see you.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Exceptional Companies Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you liked this show, please reach out through our website, www.excoadvisors.com, for free tools to order a copy of Selling Main Street, or to sign up for our free webinar on how to sell your Main Street business.